On episode 16 of Chit Chat, we ask ourselves the question, when is a game and when is it just an experience? Does it really matter as long as you're having fun with friends at the table? Well, whatever you put in front of us, we'll give it a shot and let you know what we think. Welcome back to Chit Chat. This is episode 16, Sweet 16. And before we get into the topics, we want to make an announcement right off the front here. You notice we've got two games behind us. We've got Thanos Rising and Legendary Creatures. These are two games we've played recently, and we're going to be giving them away to you. We're going to try to do this every episode of Chit Chat if we can. Give a game or two away. All you have to do is comment down below. Tell us you love us. Tell us you hate us. Whatever you want to tell us. We're going to pick a couple people and randomly choose some people to get those games. So, for the topic tonight, we are going to be talking about games as usual, but we're also going to be talking about activities or experiences, because there's a debate that's going on, if you didn't know. Some people think certain things are games and certain things are activities, and there's a bit of a debate between those two. So let's jump right into that. Does anyone have anything to share right off the bat?
I just want to make sure that we label this as taking some very broad strokes with a paintbrush when we label these. Like, we're kind of going out of the element and saying that certain games aren't really games. And I think people are probably going to take offense to some of those things. I know that I feel very passionately about very specific games that may come up.
Yes, you will offend people.
But the thing is, I mean, everyone likes different style of games.
Sure.
That's why there's so many games out there, and why certain games are popular to certain audiences and they're not popular to other audiences. So we need to make sure that we just label that ahead of it, and just let you know that even though we may not like something, it doesn't make the game bad.
Yeah, we mean no offense. So if we say we don't like it, it doesn't mean you're dumb for liking it. But yeah, we are going to talk about what we think is a game, what isn't a game.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, where do you draw that line? I mean, what makes a game a game? Because everyone you talk to is going to tell you something different. Some people will tell you rules. Some people will tell you victory conditions. Some people will say there has to be points or one single winner.
Let me take a stab at that, teacher. So, the very, very basic definition of a game, if you look up what makes a game, or the difference between a game and an activity, I've always heard, is once you take an activity and you apply some rule and or goal or objective to that activity, then it becomes a game. So if you're throwing a ball up and down in the air, that's an activity. But if you're doing so and trying to do it 10 times in a row without dropping it, it's become a game.
That being the rule.
Yes.
Right.
That's the most basic sort of delineation between what's an activity and what's a game. Now, in this debate, it's certainly less clear than that, I think.
Well, I mean, I think it's important as a gamer, you have to ask yourself, what type of gamer are you? Like, what motivates you to play the game? And that's what makes everyone very different. I play games for a completely different reason by which you play games. So that kind of delineates not only what type of gamer we are, but whether we call specific games mechanically or games as activities.
Yeah.
Well, before we get too far in, for people that are watching that don't even know what we're talking about, we're talking about the difference between a game like Legendary Creatures versus a game like Unlock or Time Stories.
Or Apples to Apples.
Or Apples to Apples, where these games don't really have...
They may have
a lot of rules. They don't have, like, there's no dice rolling or any mechanics, really, so to speak.
Right.
But where do those fall on the spectrum of what a game is, for sure?
Right.
So what do you think, Ryan? I mean, do you think there is a line? Do you call some things games and some things not?
I mean, I think there's a line for sure. If you're going to ask me where that line is, I don't have an answer for you. But I think that there is even variations between, like, if you look at Time Stories, it's basically an activity that you're playing together where you're trying to solve a mystery. There's not a lot of game to it, but there are rules, right? So it's really foggy. But when you go to something like Unlock, where there's really not, there's like maybe 2 rules, right, to that whole, to like a whole game of Unlock.
There's not exactly mechanisms in Unlock, but there are definitely systems in place that you follow to sort of get through that game. There's a rule book. There's ways that game, quote unquote, works, and I just called it a game. Like, for me, I kind of regard everything as a game. Like, if I'm sitting down at the table and having fun with people, I with a very broad stroke, call that a game experience. Right or wrong, that's just where I stand.
Well, in the traditional sense of what we're doing here, talking about board games.
Yeah.
We include card games in the board game world, and we'll include like one of the social deduction games, like Avalon or Secret Hitler or some of these games. Is that in the traditional? I guess in the traditional sense, if it doesn't have a board, is it a board game?
That's
that's getting more on that line. I mean, I've even seen interesting debates on people saying pinball is a type of board game. How it's used, there's rules, there's a dexterity aspect to it as well.
That's interesting.
It is, and some people make some really interesting points about that. But yeah, I think there is a line where it comes to it's just an activity. It could still be a game, but is it in the traditional sense of, would you put it in the board game realm? So like, I don't know, Twister to me is not in that, but it's an activity.
True. I mean, again though, you'd call that a game though, right?
You call it a game because it's got rules, absolutely. But you're going to get more of an experience out of it than, anything else I would think.
Let's talk about like enthusiast games. What would you label as, I mean, we all know what a game is. Like mechanically, within mechanisms, Euros are very typical games. Like you have a large set of rules and you're navigating all those.
Scoring points.
But there's other games that are basically an expression, like a camaraderie event, right? Like Apples to Apples. I would even consider a game like Mysterium to be one of those games where you have rules, but it's more the expression of the people that are playing the game that functions the game itself, and not the rules by which the game are played. You can look at a card in Mysterium and say, I interpret this completely different. If you play a game that's a Euro, you can't interpret that any different. It is what it is right there on that card. So how would you label a game like that?
And see, I think, and I'll get to that in a second, I'll answer that question, but you touched on something that's interesting earlier when you said, like you like have certain types of game tastes versus, like, for example, me, and that kind of helps define what you think is a game or not. But one of the things you just mentioned, I think it's important to remember that a game like a social deduction game or a Mysterium or an Apples to Apple, those games rely less on sort of mathematical point scoring and those sorts of things, and more on getting in the head of the other people at the table, which can also be a game. And it made me think of poker, right? Poker's like a great combination of things. There's a lot of game in there, a lot of mechanics, a lot of rules, a lot of things that you have to, basically do. It's not just pure luck when you play poker. But it also relies heavily on bluffing and those sorts of elements.
There's an element of trying to read people.
Yeah.
Where some games, you're your own little world, and you're working your thing. Like some worker placements are a lot like that. You're kind of doing your own little thing. You're all watching everybody else, but you're not really technically reading them. You're just trying to strategize enough to where you maybe get to that point A to point B faster than they are.
Yeah.
I love Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, that social deduction game. I mean, that's pure just trying to read people and trying to read the bluff. And that's a great experience. Sheriff of Nottingham would be another one, trying to get that bluffing aspect and trying to read people.
Yeah, but bluffing games in general, they can have, you can have bluffing in any, I'd say Sheriff of Nottingham is a game. There's a lot of game.
There's
a lot of
points
going on.
Yeah. Right.
But
Set
whereas
collection,
Deception is really not. There's really no, it's just talking. There's really
it's back to what Jeremy was just saying.
No anything else.
How do you interpret the cards that are out in front of you in terms, trying to find out, who is the killer or who is an investigator?
I think that it just draws a lot of people will get different reactions, I guess I should say, when you're playing a game like that. Because I can sit down in front of a Euro and I can have the same game experience no matter who I'm playing it with because the rules never change. But when you're playing something that's more of an activity, like Apples to Apples or like Mysterium, your gameplay experience is going to vary completely based on the people that are at the table with you.
That's true, and I think that is, I would say, I would classify that as something to acknowledge about those types of games, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that makes them not games. I just think it's a different kind of game when you're trying to get into other people's heads. That's what a lot of those games are for the most part. I was thinking too, when you were mentioning Deception, Don't Mess with Cthulhu, which we all really enjoy playing, and it's very basic, in terms of mechanics. You're not doing too much, and that relies heavily on just totally getting into each other's heads. That game's all about more doing that and trying to cast doubt on other people and acting, if you will, than it is playing anything mechanically.
I'd still qualify that as a game. A social deduction
so would
game.
I.
But then when you compare something like Don't Mess with Cthulhu to the other side, something like an escape room, like Escape Room, the board game. Is that a game? when you're just solving puzzles together.
Yeah, like Unlock, if I compare Unlock to something like Pandemic, there's a lot more game mechanics in Pandemic, but at the end of the day, we're all cooperating to do something under certain guidelines. There's this much time and we need to get through something. In a way, that's a game. It's not a traditional board game for sure, but it's definitely a game experience that you're having at a table. That's how, this is the last thing I'll say for a while, but
it's not the last
time. For a while, I said.
At least a minute.
Anytime I sit down at the table, open a box, and get things out of the box and play it and experience that with people, to me, that's a game.
Yeah.
Like that's how I always call that a game. And more to the point, anyone who goes out of their way to say this isn't even a game, I'll just say, well, then you don't have to play with us.
I'm not disagreeing at all with anybody, but we've talked about this before in Chit Chat about whether labels are important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I stand by the fact that I think labels are important, because if somebody comes and says, "Do you want to play this game?" and they might say, "Well, it's kind of more like just like a social activity," then I get to go into that experience having a completely different mindset, like Apples to Apples or Cards Against Humanity, which is a popular one. I know what Cards Against Humanity says, and if somebody says, "Want to play this new game, Cards Against Humanity?" I can say, well, I mean, it's kind of a game, but like, don't go into it expecting some meaty decisions that you have to make, right? Like, you're putting cards down and you're laughing a lot. Like, it's a social bonding experience, but it's not.
Right.
There's not a lot of game there.
Right. Yeah, I've kind of been sitting back and listening to you guys talk, because I don't really want to inject my opinion, because I know it's going to be hushed by all you guys.
Let's get to it.
No, it really, at the end of the day, it depends on what kind of gamer are you.
Yeah.
Like, those type of games, the games you guys have been talking about, Mysterium, Time Stories, those aren't my style of games. I don't enjoy them. It doesn't mean they're not good games, but I don't see them functionally as games, like a hard line mechanical structure to the game. It's more of an experience. Like when you play Time Stories, and it's an experience with other players. There's other issues that I have with with that activity game, whatever you want to call it, but I don't find those as enjoyable to me. I guess it doesn't make them not games, but I don't see them as games.
They're
I
not
see
in your
those
wheelhouse.
I see them as activities.
I don't think you're alone in that opinion. I mean, if you look at BGG, you see a lot of comments just like that, like people that don't like this new wave, and we're seeing a lot more games like Unlock and escape rooms and these puzzle games that you have to solve. And that's a growing genre, and for a lot of people.
I mean, when I play games, I look for that same expression, that same camaraderie, but I look for them in different ways. Like games like Twilight Imperium, which we have over here, Near and Far, Eclipse, those games where you're expanding across the map, and you still have the freedom of expansion and expression within the game, but it's controlled by you, and it's controlled by very specific mechanisms within the game. Like Near and Far is a great example because it has a really cool narrative in the game, but it also has a really hardcore Euro base by which the game is structured.
Well, I think that's, and maybe I'm reading too much into you as a person, but I think a game like Near and Far, or any kind of game that's set by mechanics, you either win or you lose, and you win or lose according to a set of rules, and you can look back and you can say, this is why I lost. But I think in a lot of these other games, it's not about you. It's not about, you could play a perfect game and still lose in something like Mysterium or something like,
Yeah, I would add on to this, again, and if you want to lay down on the couch, Jeremy, as we analyze you. No, I think you like a lot of the structure and mechanics involved with a game like a Euro. Whereas some of the other things we're talking about, in a way, you don't like luck and randomness in a lot of your games. And in a way, some of these things, because you're relying on other people, and they may, like in Mysterium, the ghost may be awful at the game.
Right.
And then it kind of ruins the game a little bit for some people. I've played games where the ghost was awful, and we had fun because it was just ridiculous and hilarious how bad they were. And we teased them the entire time.
Right.
Find your own fun in that, yeah.
So it was fun, but it still, it kind of ruined the game aspect of it for sure. But my point is, I think that randomness of not knowing how people are going to behave in a game, or not necessarily understand, like, why would, like, you're doing something that doesn't make any sense, and it's like, that doesn't compute.
No, I mean, I totally get that. You nailed my personality right there, because I look at myself as a very dry mechanical gamer. Like, I like the math within a game.
Yeah.
And I don't like social games all that much, and I really am not a fan of cooperative games. However, look at you, Gary. You love social games. Like Time's Up is like one of your favorite games, but you also love cooperative games.
Right.
You've had a ton of great experience with cooperative games, but that's your type of game.
Right.
You can appreciate a lot more than probably what I can.
Right.
And I know you can as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty easygoing. I mean, I really, like, you could say I have wide, diverse tastes, or you could say I have low standards. I don't know how to put it, but
Both.
I like, well, you're my friend anyway.
Touche.
I like a lot of different styles of games, and I guess when I sit down at a table, I know what to expect. As long as there's a description, you know, like you were saying, people come up to you, hey, you want to play a game? What's it like? Well, it's a game. You know, you need more than that.
Right.
And where I would, again, not want to get into the labels debate again, but where I would sort of slightly disagree is, I think descriptions are important, but I think people should be careful about relying too much on labels, because sometimes you can say, this is this kind of game, and it might label it in such a way that turns someone off before they really get a full appreciation for, oh, what kind of game is it? Because there's games that we've overlooked. I mean, we pass over games all the time because we kind of put it into this bucket or that bucket. And then we play Kung Fu Zoo.
Yeah.
This is admittedly, I think WizKids would say, a silly dexterity game with animals, totally kid type of game. He played it with Addison, and then he said, you got to play this, and we played it, and it is exactly what he said. You want to keep playing it. This is a game we would have overlooked for a long time, but if you just sit down and try it, you might think, oh, wow, this is a game I like. I had no idea I would like something
I think
like
you made
this.
an important point there, too, is when you describe a game, whether you like the game or not, it's more important to, instead of just teaching the rules, this is what you're doing, this is A, B, C, and D, to sell the experience. Like, to say, this Kung Fu Zoo, you're representing these animals, and you don't want to get caged. Instead of saying you're just going to flick a die and try to hit the other person die in. That's across the board with anything that you're trying to teach, to sell the experience of what you're trying to actually do. I know you've mentioned many times Lisboa. That was such a hard game for us to learn until you learned the backstory of what Lisboa was about, and then things start to naturally fall into place.
Yeah, and that works for me. It doesn't work for some other people, and the theme really sings to me that way. Another, like one of the things you just said made me think of another game too. The number of times I've tried to teach Bunny Kingdom to different people or introduce the game to them, I have to spend the first 15 minutes like apologizing and saying, now give it a chance. I know it's bunnies, but just give it a chance. And then almost every time, in fact, I can't think of a time where someone hasn't played it and went, oh wow, that is really good. Despite the fact that it has kind of a weird, friendly, kiddie type of theme, people dig it. That's why I really suggest people just give everything a chance. Worst case is you're going to lose through 2 hours out of your life and play a game with some friends.
You bring up a really good point, and Gary mentioned earlier Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. I think if you sit a bunch of players down at Deception and say, here's your goal, we're going to put some clues and you're going to try to figure out the clues. That's not, okay, what's the game there? But then that's not the game. The game is bluffing and reading people and trying to get into other people's heads and figure out, who's the murderer there. Like, that's the game. And I think when you sit down to any of these activities, you need to explain, like, here's what you should be doing. Like, don't just sit back and be passive. For these, I think, activity-style games to work, everybody has to be engaged. You can't just sit back and behind your little, screen and play your own game.
Yeah,
you
that's
have
a good point.
to be involved.
Selling the experience or describing the experience that the game maker intends you to have with it is, I think, pretty key.
And I think, kind of what we're getting at is, pretty much all games are activities.
Yeah,
That's true.
And they're all going to give you an experience. How you define that, for you, it's different, a little bit different than me. But I understand where you're coming from. I get that. I know that's a very more kind of...
It's a personal thing.
Very personal, and more kind of very concrete definition of a game when you think of a game. But, I can sit down, like I have all my coworkers, almost all of them playing Time's Up, almost once a week.
Really?
They called me the other day, I was at another location, like, hey, where's the Time's Up cards? We want to play. So, but there's a competition there. I get it's a game. It's not on a board or anything, and it's silly fun. It is kind of an activity, but the experience sells it. And like you were just saying, if you sell the experience, people are just going to really, really enjoy it. you know, and it's a great way to kind of start easing them into other things.
Or they're going to know it's not from them.
Right.
Or it's not exactly, but yeah, you know, that's kind of the teacher, you know.
I think if I tried to talk to Jeremy, like, Jeremy, the whole point, you got to try to figure out what David's thinking. Right away, he might say, I don't even want to. Yeah, that doesn't sound like my kind of game.
I'm gonna set up a Euro.
Yeah. Is there math involved in this? I'm out.
Guys, let us know what you think a game is versus an activity. You have to make a comment anyway to win those games, so you might as well comment about this. I'm going to get in my soapbox one final time. I want to know what you guys think about Mysterium and Time Stories, because I want to see people's reactions. I want to know what people truly think. Are they games? Are they experiences? No.
I'm going to make a prediction.
No, that's my last word.
Prediction is it's going to be about 50-50.
All right. Let's talk about games we played.
Yeah.
Well, I was at a local convention. We do one here in Indianapolis called Hoosier Con. Little pun there. Got to play a bunch of games, some classics, Werewords, and Don't Mess with Cthulhu we played, and just a bunch of stuff. But
those are more activities, though, right?
But one game that I got to play, and I played this game when it first came out, but only a little bit, and so I didn't really get into it. But I played probably a couple hours of it at Hoosier Con, and that's Fabled Fruit. And after playing it for hours and just seeing these new cards, I think we played like 5 or 6 games of Fabled Fruit.
So you went through the whole deck?
We didn't get through the whole deck, but we got about halfway through the whole deck.
It's a lot of cards.
It's a lot of cards, but the way that game expands and builds, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
I think I got to
Jeremy and I
18 to 20.
Oh, really?
18 to 20 in the number, but I don't
Yeah, we were somewhere around there when we stopped.
It goes like 50, doesn't it? 50
it goes up to
cards?
50, yeah. And it's just...
It's a fun game.
It's cool.
It's crazy how the game board basically changes. It's kind of like a worker placement game, but the worker placement spots are changing every...
It's cool. It's just over way too fast. Like, you play it and you're out
Well,
in
that's
half
why
hour.
you got to
I'd want to have a longer
That's why you got to play... You kind of built to play more than one game in a row.
Yeah, I've been meaning to... I don't have a copy of that myself. I want to get a copy of that and play through the whole thing. Not in one sitting necessarily, but I want to really commit to it and get through the entire deck, because you can come back to it over and over.
Kind of a filler. Right? It's like a legacy filler game.
Yeah, it's
I think
really
it might
unique.
be the only legacy style filler game out there.
It's a very cool concept. Gary?
Well, see, I played Thanos Rising with you guys.
Yeah.
Which you'll be seeing more about here in the future.
Yeah, look for our episode. We have a show called Round 1 coming out. If you haven't heard about it, our first episode is going to be Thanos Rising. So yeah, we all got a chance.
So no spoilers, so I'll stop at that. Yeah. But my big thing I'm really excited about is that I just picked up the Role Player Monsters vs. Minions expansion. We've played it kind of, I guess it was kind of in prototypish, final prototypish form about what was that, a little over a year ago?
It was a while ago.
I love Role Player. It's so much fun. You know, you're building your character, kind of like a D&D type, building all your attributes and your stats. And it's a great game, but then at the end it's like, well, that's it. The expansion, I think, is just essential. It's one of these essential expansions. If you have Role Player, you got to get this expansion. Now you can take your character and go fight monsters with it. And it's awesome. And he did a great job with it. So
yeah, I would agree. That's the base game is good.
Right.
We all really liked it. That makes it great.
Exactly.
Like, that makes it far more replayable than the original.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. It fixed my only issue with the base game was that there wasn't... You couldn't do anything
cool
with
your character. Now you can.
Really cool stuff to do.
Super fun.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, I didn't play Bunny Kingdom, but I did teach it.
Okay.
On Easter?
Almost. It was the day before Easter.
Oh, okay.
I went up to Lafayette. Isaac Childress had a little gathering to celebrate Gloomhaven.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And everyone was just playing a bunch of games. And funny enough, he had a table of his own games that he brought for people to play. They were all like super heavy games, you know, like Arkwright and things like that. And I'm like, I'm not sure everyone's gonna, hey, let's just grab this and play. But Bunny Kingdom is, he likes that, and Seasons were on the table. So I grabbed Bunny Kingdom and taught it to 4 people who wanted to learn a game. So I love teaching, so I taught it.
Great game.
But it was that same experience where a couple of the guys at the table were like, bunnies? Seriously?
Just roll with it.
So I didn't play that, but I taught it. Play-wise, we played a handful of games. We played we're going to be doing a Kickstarter preview for a game called The Factory Game.
Fantastic
Factories.
It's good.
It was fun. It's
really good.
An engine builder to the nth degree. It was a perfect little engine builder. We really enjoyed that. So take a look out for that in the next few weeks probably from us.
Yeah, I taught you Le Havre. You had not played Le Havre
I'd never
before.
played Le Havre. It was an embarrassing admission, and
I've never played it either.
I have not played it.
It was
I gotta
good.
play it.
It's a good game.
I got stomped, of course, going into it for the first time. I'm just building this engine that's going nowhere, not even
I didn't tell him all the essential stuff.
Of course.
You have to let you figure it out on your own.
You do kind of
Put on your big boy pants. You'll be fine.
You do kind of have to figure it out on your
How
own.
many points did you score? Do you want to share that?
I don't remember exactly,
4?
but I know
I don't
that I
remember
think
either.
Jeremy beat me about 50 points.
It was a lot.
It's
50
just
to
I
1.
didn't go heavy on the ships.
Yeah.
Gotta start
Yeah,
getting
he
those
was
ships.
starving the entire time.
It is a port, right?
It is a game about building ships, and I didn't build ships, and that's a problem.
If you want to know punishing, playing against Jeremy is one thing. I had a chance to play against Isaac a couple weeks ago at a little get-together. He crushed everybody at the table almost every single game, except for Crokinole, which I beat him at. This is the one game I beat Isaac Childress at. And I'll take that
You're a
to
better
my grave.
flicker than he was.
Yeah,
huh?
right.
Yeah. If you can call that a game.
I think it's an activity.
Galaxy Owners. You and I played
Yeah,
that.
we did play that.
It's
I did
a really
video
cool
about that,
worker
too.
placement game from IDW. It's kind of like Pacific Rim, but better.
Yeah.
You
it
have
does
a
feel like
pilot and a
Pacific
mech,
Rim.
and you're mixing them together, and then you put these two together. You get specific traits, and it's a worker placement game. It's a Euro, but it looks like a
Cool.
like a AMERISTYLE game. It's really neat. And the last one is Court of the Dead that we'll mention. The three of us have played this.
Yeah, you got to
And
play
we
it.
were really surprised, but this is a super solid game. It's a dudes on a map game. It's got an economy where players are competing against each other, but they're also kind of working together to not move these two tracks up, because if the tracks move too high, everybody at the table gets penalized for being at certain areas on the board. It's beautiful. It's done by Project Raygun in conjunction with Sideshow Collectibles. And Sideshow Collectibles is the bomb.
I can
it's
say
really-
this is
it's
not the
really
last
good.
time you're going to hear about
No.
this game.
No, we also have we have an episode around one with that coming out
Because
too.
it's a good game.
It's
Yeah,
really
it is.
good, and if you haven't seen in social media, the game is making the rounds with a lot of reviewers. A lot of people are starting to talk about it. The greatest thing I'd say about the game is it gives you that dudes on the map experience, but it's lightning fast.
Yeah, it
the
is.
game plays super fast, and it's over pretty quickly. Like it's like a 90-minute game?
Easily, yeah.
Yeah.
Even with
Oh, wow.
4. Yep.
Yeah, it's really good. So that's what we've been playing. Again, remember to comment down below at your chance to win Thanos Rising or Legendary Creatures. And check us out next time on Chit Chat. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot. Well, that's another episode of Chit Chat in the bag. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out another one, there's probably one right over here in the bottom left-hand corner, or probably your right-hand corner. Whatever corner, we have something to click on. So click on one of these things and good things will happen.